thought I had found the love of my life, but the truth behind the man who saved me was darker than any nightmare. In this story, my husband has a hidden past, a past that involves my own mother, and something even darker, an entity that feeds on images, reflections, and forgotten women. Based on facts, historical records, and unexplained events, this is a narrative of betrayal, obsession, and silent horrors that span generations. Brace yourself for suspense. Do you have a hair-raising true story? Send it to us in the comments or inbox. It can be told here. I know exactly when everything started to fall apart. It wasn't on our wedding day, or the night I found that letter in the back of his drawer. No, it started long before that. It started the day I almost died, and he saved me. That day, I was 22 years old and trying to escape the shadow of my family. I had left home angry with my mother, as I had so many times before. The difference was that this time, I had no intention of going back. I just wanted to walk aimlessly, to let my anger pass. But I had turned down the wrong street at the wrong time, and a man I had never seen before tried to drag me into an alley. I screamed, kicked, and that was when he appeared. Tall, calm, cold as a blade. I remember the sound of his punches being sharp, precise, as if he knew exactly where to hit so that the other man would never try to do the same to anyone again. That's how I met Gabriel. I was shaking from head to toe, and he just held out his hand to me, as if nothing had happened. "Are you okay?" he asked, and I couldn't answer. I just cried, and he hugged me, a firm hug, as if he already knew me. It was in that hug that everything inside me broke. All the hardness, all the anger toward my mother, all the fears I had carried since I was a child. Because with him I felt safe, for the first time in a long time. Gabriel was 8 years older than me. He had eyes that seemed to understand everything without me needing to explain anything. And a calm that, while healing me, made me wonder what was behind that silence. He worked as a freelance photographer and said he liked to capture what people were hiding. That should have alerted me. But at the time, it seemed like poetry. Within a few months, we were living together. My mother, as always, tried to sabotage everything. She said he was too old for me, that I was naive, that he wasn't who I thought he was, and I, as always, ignored her. I made a point of not inviting her to our engagement. I told myself that this was a new beginning, a new life, far from her lies and control. Time passed. 2 years later, we were married. Gabriel had a strange way of looking at people silently, as if he were judging, weighing them down. But with me, he was sweet. I was always enchanted by the surprises he prepared, the breakfasts in bed, the photos he took of me without me noticing. It was as if he was always watching me, and for some reason I found that beautiful, until I started noticing the details. First, there were the deleted messages on my phone. Then, my mother's name kept coming up in random conversations. One day, he offered to bring her Christmas presents, even though he knew I was fighting with her. He said he wanted to build bridges. I thought it was noble. I thought it was mature. I thought he wanted the best for me. But I started to get suspicious when I happened to see a picture of her among the photos from a project he said was just commercial. It was an old photo. Very old. She was young. Much younger than I remembered. And he was standing next to her. I stopped. I zoomed in on the image. My heart froze. The face was unmistakable. The same scruffy beard. The same piercing gaze. And then it all started to make sense. Why she hated him so much. Why he always changed the subject when her name came up. Why her anger had become so out of proportion when she found out we were together. She didn't hate him. She knew him. And probably loved him, or was betrayed by him. That night, I waited for him to fall asleep and searched through every drawer, every hidden folder. I found letters. There weren't many, but enough to turn my world upside down. They were signed by her. Some were dated more than 15 years ago. Others, from 2 years before he met me. They will never understand what we went through. When you look at me like that, I forget I have a daughter. I felt nauseous. I dropped everything on the floor and ran to the bathroom. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he had betrayed me, or the fact that, in some way, I was just the continuation of a story that wasn't mine. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. It was before you, long before. Did you love her? He was silent. That silence, the same one that once made me trust. Now it was a knife. And then he said something I will never forget. I saved you because you reminded me of her. But I stayed because you were different. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. I wanted it all to be a lie. But deep down, I knew. I had married the man my mother had loved, or hated. I was, unknowingly, the shadow of a past he had tried to revive. And now, every memory I had of him was tainted. But that was just the beginning. The following week, I received an anonymous phone call. A female voice, low, almost breathless. He saved me too, but not out of love. Run while you can. I froze, and for the first time, I felt real fear. The voice on the phone was unrecognizable, but there was something about it that stopped me cold. A raw, strangled anguish. And when I hung up, I felt like I had just opened a door that should never have been opened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Gabriel sleeping. That same calm breathing, those serene features, as if nothing had happened. As if he was just the man who loved me, who had saved me, who made my latte exactly the way I liked it. But now, I didn't know who he was anymore. The next day, I went to my mother's house. Not because I missed her, but because I was desperate. I needed to look her in the eyes. I needed to know what she was hiding. She opened the door with a downcast face, as if she had known something was coming. The house smelled the same as always, old lavender mixed with stale coffee. Nothing seemed to have changed, but there was a silence between us that put me on alert. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "So you found out." I didn't have to say anything. I just walked in. I sat on the couch in the living room where I had cried so many times over little things. Now, it was different. "How old were you when you met Gabriel?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she sighed. 25. I was married to your father at the time. That made me shiver. My father, the man who raised my sisters and me with steady hands and dry words. Did you love each other? I don't know. Maybe. I was young, confused. He showed up at an art show. He made me feel alive again. She looked out the window, as if seeing something only she could understand. But he was cold. Too intense. We drifted apart after I discovered that he observed too much. That he took pictures without asking. Pictures of me, your sister, even yours. You were a child, but he had a way of being obsessed. My stomach turned. Are you saying that he never touched anyone, but I could see it in his eyes. He studied people, as if he was collecting every emotion. She stood up, walked to the closet, and picked up a wooden box. She took out a thick envelope, yellowed with age. Inside were dozens of photos. Some of her, others of me, when I was still a child. In one of them, I was playing in the backyard, and behind the bush, a figure with a camera. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you ever tell me any of this? Because no one would believe it. Not your father, not you. And because in a way, I felt guilty too. I took the photos with me. I went back home without knowing where I was stepping. Gabriel wasn't there. And for the first time, I wished he would never come back. But he did. Hours later, with the same soft smile as always. He hugged me from behind and whispered in my ear, "I missed you." I pushed his hands away. He noticed. He looked into my eyes. He didn't ask anything, but I saw it. He knew that I knew. That night we slept in the same bed, or pretended to. In the darkness I could hear his breathing, and it sounded different, heavier, like there was a tension hanging over us. And there was. In the middle of the night, I got up to drink some water. When I walked into the living room, the light from his laptop screen lit up the room. The computer was open, and I couldn't resist. There was a folder called Old Inspirations. Inside were subfolders with dates, years and years of entries. I went into the most recent one. I gasped. They were photos of me. Some recent, others from before we met. Some clearly taken from a distance, with zoom, from a time when I was still in school. Each file was named with phrases: the perfect shadow, silence in red, resistance in bloom. But it was the last one that made me shiver. A picture of me, sleeping, dated 2 weeks ago. The file name? She will never know. But I knew. Now I knew. The next morning, I went to the police station. I wanted to report something. But what? He had never hurt me. He had never threatened me. And all those were just photos. But then I remembered the call. I returned home determined to find the woman with the voice. And I started in the only possible place, his past. I went through his documents, old and new, until I found a plane ticket 5 years ago to a city in the interior, Campo Verde. I searched, small, isolated, a place where no one disappears unless no one is looking. I booked a hotel, and I went. When I got there, I looked through records, local newspapers. On the third day, I found a name that made everything stop. Luciana Diniz, missing for 5 years. Last seen leaving a photography exhibition. The author of the exhibition? Gabriel S. Lima. My head spun. I returned to the hotel in shock. I opened the envelope of letters from my mother again. I read each one with a new look, and I found a passage that I had previously overlooked. Gabriel, you taught me that love is made of shadows, but sometimes I wonder how many women live trapped in theirs. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the mirror in the hotel room, and for the first time I asked myself, who was this man I had married? Luciana Diniz's face wouldn't leave my mind. The resemblance between us was disturbing. Same discreet smile, same face shape, same age at the time of her disappearance as I was when I met Gabriel. It was as if he was repeating patterns. I went home that same day, and it wasn't fear that drove me anymore. It was a cold, controlled fury, a sick need to understand what he saw in me. Why me? Why my mother? Why that other woman? When I arrived, Gabriel was in the kitchen, cutting fruit as if the world were in perfect order. He saw me and smiled. "You disappeared," he said in a soft, almost rehearsed voice. I was worried. I was in Campo Verde. The knife's cut stopped in midair. He didn't say anything. He just rested his hands on the sink and turned his back to me. "Do you remember Luciana?" I asked. The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. She disappeared after visiting one of your exhibitions. People think she ran away, but you and I both know better, don't we? He turned slowly, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something in his eyes that had never been there before. Panic. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice shaking. "Then make me understand." He walked toward me, slowly, as if each step was an attempt to stitch together the cracks I had opened. "I loved you, really, unlike anything I've felt before. And with my mother, was it love too? And with Luciana, how many more?" He looked down. "They were part of the process. They all are." "Process?" My voice trailed off. "You have to believe. I've never hurt anyone. I just capture. They inspire me. I need to see how each woman reacts to the world, to love, to abandonment, to fear. Only then can I immortalize them." I took a step back. "Are you telling me you used each of us as an experiment?" He stepped closer again, eyes alight. "I don't experiment. Art. You are the masterpiece." Those words were a punch. I fled to my room and locked the door. I called the city police station. I told them everything, from the beginning, the photos, the letters, the missing woman. They said they would send a team. In the early morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. He was walking, muttering something. When I approached the door, I heard, "She needs to understand. She needs to see." I grabbed a pair of scissors, the only thing I could find. I leaned against the wall, waiting. but he didn't try to get in. The next morning, the police arrived. They searched the house. They found the briefcase, the photos, the letters. But what made them open a warrant was something I didn't even expect. In the basement, under the loose wooden floor, there were boxes locked with padlocks. And inside, more photos, more women, and videos. The images showed him following women on the street. Notes about their habits, schedules, fears, intimate details that only someone who had observed them for a long time could know. At the end of the day, Gabriel was taken away. But this story doesn't end there. 2 days later, I received a letter. Handwritten. No sender. It just said, "You escaped, but not because he loved you, because he wasn't done with you yet, but someone did for you. You don't know what you took from him." I couldn't sleep that night. And worse, I began to suspect that I was no longer alone at home. The chair on the balcony kept moving. The faucet in the bathroom kept dripping even though it was turned off. And one night, I swear to God, I heard the sound of a camera being clicked, right next to my bed. The sound of the camera clicking still echoed in my mind as I turned on the bedroom light. Gasping, I was alone. Or at least I should have been. I looked around, searching for signs, traces. Nothing. The apartment looked exactly as I had left it, but something told me I wasn't alone. I turned the house upside down. I checked the locks, the windows, even the lining of the closet. Everything was intact. Maybe it was the panic speaking louder. Maybe the trauma. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my imagination. The next day, I went to the police station. I wanted to know about Gabriel. The officer looked at me with a confused expression, leafing through papers in a restrained hurry. "Gabriel dos Santos Lima? Yes, he was transferred yesterday morning." "Transferred? To where?" He hesitated. "We don't know. The order came from above. Sealed court order. They claimed involvement in a larger investigation." That didn't make sense. A man with dozens of obscure records, traces in videos and photos, being transferred in silence. I returned home with the feeling that something even deeper was hidden, and that for some reason, they wanted me to stay quiet. That same night, I found a white envelope under the door. No name, no sender. Inside, a single folded sheet of paper. A photo. It was me, sleeping, just like that other picture on his computer. But now, with a difference. In the background of the picture, in the lower left corner, there was a reflection in the mirror. And it wasn't Gabriel. It was a woman's face, expressionless, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned dress, almost a nightgown. Her eyes were too dark to be real. Her skin was as pale as chalk. I dropped the photo on the floor, feeling bile rise in my throat. This was no montage. This was a real capture. And the worst part, I wasn't alone in that anymore. The next day, I went to my mother's house again. I needed to confront her once more. She greeted me with a tired but unsurprised look, as if she had expected me to return. "You saw her, didn't you?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Who?" "The woman in the photos. She appears when he is ready to leave, or when he doesn't want to go alone." My mother sat up slowly, her eyes moist. She appeared to me too, around the time I broke up with him. One night I was lying down, and I felt a weight at the foot of the bed. When I opened my eyes, she was there, standing still, just looking, as if she was measuring me, as if she was deciding something. And what did she do? Nothing. But days later, her sister had an accident, and I could never connect things for sure, but her look, it was judgmental, as if the punishment wasn't for me, but for the one I loved. I didn't know what to think. I was trapped between a sick past and a presence that didn't seem to belong in this world. I grabbed my bag, ready to leave. But before I could walk through the door, my mother grabbed my arm. "There's something you need to know." She led me to the bedroom. She took a box down from the top of the closet. Inside were more photos, but these were older, black and white, different women. In each one, the same pattern. Always a mirror in the background. Always a figure. He's been doing this for decades. Maybe it's not just him. Maybe he's just a conduit, a bridge. I left with the box under my arm and a heavy heart. I took the files to a journalist friend, Laura, who I owed her a favor. She promised to investigate. That same night, I received a call from her, whispering on the other end, "You need to get out of there. Now. There's something much bigger going on here. Gabriel isn't in jail. He never was. And this woman, this figure, she's been in over 20 cold cases, always before a woman goes missing." The call dropped, and when I turned to leave, the photo that had been on my living room floor was now stuck to the mirror, as if someone had glued it from the inside out. And in the reflection, behind me, the same face, unblinking, unmoving, just waiting. I stood motionless in front of the mirror. The image behind me was too clear to be a reflection of anything real. The woman stood there, her eyes fixed on me. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She didn't breathe, as if she were part of the glass, as if she were the glass itself. When I finally managed to turn around, she wasn't there. No sign, no sound. Just the echo of my own heart beating wildly inside my chest. I ran to my room, closed the door, and slammed the dresser against it. I grabbed my cell phone. I called Laura. I rang and rang, but no one answered. I tried again. Nothing. So I left a message, just 3 words. "She's here." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor, with the scissors next to me, staring at the door as if something might come through at any moment. When the sun finally rose, there was nothing out of place. The mirror looked normal. The photo was gone, but the phone rang. It was Laura's mother. "You're her journalist friend, aren't you?" "Yes, why?" "She disappeared. Last night. She left saying she was going to find a fountain, and she didn't come back. The car was found with the doors open, engine running. My body lost its strength. I wanted to cry, but all I could do was stay silent. I went to the place where her car had been found. It was a dead-end street, lined with empty warehouses. On the ground, I found only one thing, a torn piece of an envelope. In the corner, a handwritten note. She also tried to see too much. That night, I went back to my mother's house. I let myself in without knocking. She was sitting in the armchair, as if she hadn't left it since the last time I was there. "You shouldn't have looked for her. You knew, didn't you? You knew this was going to happen. I warned you. This woman, this reflection, she exacts a price. But who is she? What is she?" My mother looked at me with a sadness so deep it seemed ancient, as if she had carried it for generations. "She is the end of all he touches." I remained silent. Then I opened the box I had with me. Inside were the old photos. One caught my attention. It was older than the others, and for the first time, it wasn't a woman in the picture. It was a child, a girl of about 7, wearing a white dress. Her eyes were dark and unmoving. In the background, a mirror. Who is that child? That's the first one. First what? The first one he photographed. They say that since that day, she has never left the mirrors. I went home that day convinced of one thing. Either I ended it, or I would be next. I took all the photos, letters, and videos, and took them to a historian friend from college who now worked with old archives. His name was Arthur, and he was one of the few who still believed in me. 2 days later, he called me. "You need to come here. Now." In the historical archive, he had made a discovery. Photographic records of a man who looked very much like Gabriel, dating back to 1943. Exactly the same face, the same eyes, the same camera. "It's impossible. Could it be his grandfather?" I asked. Arthur just shook his head. "No. The name is the same. The signature too. He never changed it. The photos were all there. Women from different eras. Always a figure in the reflections. Always her. Sometimes clear, sometimes blurred, but always present." "What if he's not just a man?" I asked. "So what is he?" Arthur hesitated before answering. "Her instrument. I went home with that sentence hammering in my head. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a cycle, a repetition of horrors spanning decades. And now, it was my turn. That night, I made a decision. I faced the mirror in the living room. I sat in front of it, and I waited, for hours, until she showed up, first as a shadow, then as a figure, finally as a clear, cold reflection, her eyes fixed on mine. And then she smiled, a small, strange, distorted smile, as if to say, "You get the idea. What do you want from me?" I whispered, and she answered, not with words, but with images that appeared in the mirror like a slideshow. Women, children, eyes closed, eyes wide open, all the faces he had photographed. And in the end, mine, with dead eyes. I saw myself reflected in the mirror with dead eyes. The image lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough to paralyze me. It was as if life itself had drained from my face and been projected there, like a warning, an inevitable fate. I took a step back, tripped on the carpet, hit my back on the corner of the bookshelf, but I didn't even feel any pain. I could only stare at the glass, which was now completely normal. No faces, no shadows, just my frightened expression, all too real. From that day on, mirrors followed me. Every reflective surface became a threat. In a store window, I saw her silhouette standing behind me. In the rearview mirror of the car, her eyes appeared for a millisecond. In the reflection of the water in the sink, her smile, always her. And with each new appearance, it became clearer. Time was running out. I spoke to Arthur again. He said he was analyzing historical patterns, urban legends linked to mirrors and female entities that fed on identity and image. According to his studies, these types of entities were strengthened by repetition, by the ritual of observation, by visual adoration. She is a multiplied echo. Each photo nourishes, each reflection consecrates. Gabriel is her priest, and you are the final offering. Those words stuck with me. I became paranoid. I covered the mirrors in my house. I avoided looking at glass, windows, even puddles of water. Everything could be a door. But even with all the care, she still appeared, with her eyes open, motionless, always staring at me. And what was once just a silent presence began to transform. Now, I could hear her. In the middle of the night, while he slept, his voice whispered behind the wall. A low, almost childish voice. He repeated broken phrases. "You are mine now. He gave you to me. Don't resist." I began to question my sanity. But then, something took away any doubts. I found a new photo on my phone. It hadn't been there the day before. It was a picture of my face as I slept, an angle that could only have been captured from the ceiling. In the corner of the image, a hand, pale, feminine, as if it were about to touch my head, and below the image, a file name, Last Flower, Zo1. It was like the first record of a new series, and I was the object. I decided to run away, sell everything, disappear. I moved to another state. I rented an apartment with no mirrors, no reflective windows. I cut off contact with my mother. Arthur was the only one who knew where I was. The first few days, the silence was strange, almost uncomfortable. But little by little, I began to breathe again. I thought that maybe, just maybe, all of this was behind me. Until one night, someone knocked on the door. Just one knock. 6 p.m. I went to the peephole. Nothing. I waited. I opened it slowly. And at my feet, an envelope. Inside, just one photo. A child from behind, white dress, standing in front of a mirror. In the reflection, me, adult, but with the same dead eyes from the previous vision. And in the background of the image, behind me, him, Gabriel, same hair, same beard, same fixed gaze. And he smiled, like someone calmly waiting for the end of a cycle, like someone who knows that everything, sooner or later, returns to where it started. I looked around. I didn't see anyone, but I was sure he was there, somewhere, Maybe watching me through a reflection I hadn't noticed yet. Maybe waiting for me to finally accept my role in this story. I called Arthur. I needed answers. But a woman answered. "Is it from Arthur's house?" "No, this is Olivera's funeral home." "Funeral home? What do you mean?" "Mr. Arthur was admitted here last night. He was found in his house, with all the mirrors facing him. Sudden death, they said. But the position of his body, it looked like he was trying to escape from something he could see in every direction." I hung up without saying anything else. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. And that's when I understood. It wasn't just Gabriel. It was never just him. He was just the bait, the pretty picture, the unlikely savior, the trap. She was the real prison, the real hunger. And now, there was no one left between her and me. I lay still for hours after the call. Arthur's death was like a seal. My last chance at salvation had been ripped away. The world around me seemed duller, as if something had been drained from it. The walls of the house seemed to be closing in on me. The shadows in the corners grew thicker by the day. And the silence. It was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a kind of presence. The next day, I sold everything I could in a few hours and took a bus to the countryside, to a city I didn't know, without telling anyone. My plan was simple. Disappear without a trace. But when I got off the bus, I saw a newspaper stand. And on the cover of one of the local tabloids, a headline in red letters, "Woman disappears after talking about cursed reflection." The photo was of Laura. The whole world was closing in on me like a trap. There was no safe place. Not in the past. Not in the present. I was the end of the line. The last flower in the collection. The missing image to complete the cycle. That same night, I stayed at a simple guest house with no mirrors or glass windows. I asked the owner to remove even the stainless steel cutlery from the room. She looked at me as if I was crazy, but she agreed. I locked myself in. I drew protective symbols with charcoal on the doors and floor, just as Arthur had taught me. I turned off the lights, and I waited. Around 3 a.m, I heard the first sound. One step, then another, and another one. But they were coming from inside the room. I looked around. I was alone. Then I saw it. On the white wall, a shadow that wasn't mine. And it moved. I went to my backpack, took out the only photo of the child in the white dress, and placed it on the floor, between the symbols. The moonlight came through the glassless window, and the image glowed strangely. And then, she appeared. Not as a reflection, but as presence. First, the girl. Small, silent. Her eyes were as dark as the endless night. She approached slowly. And behind her, Gabriel. Not as the man who saved me, not as the husband I once loved, but as a soulless thing. His eyes were sunken, dead. His skin was pale, as if something had sucked all the humanity out of him. He reached out his hand. "You are the last. Then she can rest." "Who is she?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The one that was forgotten. The one that was overlooked. The one that was never saved." Then I understood. She was the first victim, the first photograph, the first life he had tried to capture and never managed to free. And now she lived inside every image, every woman he had tried to understand. She was revenge, but also the sentence, and I was the last reflex she needed to break. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I did what no one had done until that moment. I looked into her eyes, direct, without deviating. No fear. If you want to get out of the mirror, then come, but don't bring anyone else. She stopped. Gabriel took a step back. The girl looked at me with deep eyes and smiled. For the first time, he smiled as if he recognized something. Maybe courage, maybe resignation. And then, everything went black. I woke up hours later on the floor of the inn. The room was normal. The sun was shining brightly through the window. The owner was knocking on the door, saying that my time was up. When I got up, something had changed. The mirrors no longer returned her gaze, just mine. I went back home. Years passed. I never saw Gabriel again. I never heard of any disappearances linked to reflections again. His camera disappeared with him. The box of photos burned itself in an unexplained fire. Today, I live in peace. Sometimes I still dream about her, but not as a nightmare, as someone who is resting, who has finally been freed. And me? I was the last image, the one that put an end to the cycle. But to this day, every time I walk in front of a mirror, I wait, just to be sure that it's still me, on this side. End.